This is The Civil Fleet, the podcast focused on activist-led refugee rescue and support missions across Fortress Europe, with me, Ben Coles. In today's episode, we are speaking with South Sudanese human rights campaigner and Refugees in Libya co-founder David Yambio. David is going to give us an update on Refugees in Libya's Unfair campaign, which is demanding that the UNHCR change the way it treats people in need of its protection, especially those the UN Refugee Agency has deemed not to be official refugees. He tells us about the Book of Shame, which he and his fellow Refugees in Libya campaigners co-wrote with members of Refugees in Tunisia and Refugees in Niger. He tells us how the book outlines the UNHCR's failures to protect people on the move in North Africa. David also tells us how he found out that the Italian state was using an Israeli firm to spy on him and tap his phone. If you want to know more about David, you should also check out episode 29 of the Civil Fleet podcast. In that one, he goes more into his journey and how he made it to Europe and what life was like in Libya, though he does discuss that here a little bit. Okay, anyway, before we get on with the show, I would like to remind you that the Civil Fleet is not just a podcast, it's also a news blog with interviews and reports and investigative stories. So go to thecivilfleet.com to find out more about that. Also, if you like what the Civil Fleet is doing and you would like to help us to continue our grassroots journalism and to continue to platform the amazing people that we have had on this podcast, then you can do that in a number of ways. You can share us around, tell your friends about us. You can give us a rating on podcast apps like Spotify or Apple and those kind of things. And you can also chuck us some money. You can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet and you can sign up there to make a small donation, a one-off donation or a monthly recurring donation if you like. And if you do so, you'll get access to a bonus episode we have on there. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet. Okay, on with the show. Okay, so shall we get started, David?
Here it is. We are now being recorded.
Excellent, David. Thank you very, very much for coming back on the Civil Fleet podcast. I have wanted to get you back on here for a long time, and you're a very busy man, so it's great that you're back on the podcast. I have a lot of things I want to talk to you about today, but we don't have much time, so we'll be quick. So first off, David, can you just tell us, people listening to the podcast might not know who you are, but can you tell us a brief background of your life up to this point?
Yeah, well, it's always very, I think, difficult to articulate on oneself or to be even described for who we are. But I am David Yambio, and I currently reside in Italy as a political refugee. I'm originally from South Sudan. I have had a very long trajectory until I arrived in Europe, starting from my country of origin, which has been at war for several years until the division of Sudan, and then the country being split into two. Is still to this very day, both the south and north has not gotten any sort of security and peace. So I did move along and across several African countries until I found myself in Libya, and that was the beginning of the nightmare to which I sacrifice most of my time today to ensure it's gotten the maximum attention it deserves to.
And I don't know, could you tell us briefly about what happened in Libya? Like we did an episode, you and I, we last spoke on the Civil Fleet podcast in 2022, in episode 29. So people listening can go listen to that for a deeper story of your background. But yeah, just tell us briefly about what happened. I know you were a refugee there. You founded Refugees in Libya, and you had problems with the UNHCR, which is the UN Refugee Agency. Maybe you can tell us just briefly about all of that.
Yeah, I think when I arrived in Libya, as I say, I found myself in Libya at the end of 2018. My circumstance was immediately something horrible because I was exposed to torture. I was abducted, kept in a warehouse by a group of people who were demanding a large amount of ransom to be paid. So this was my immediate discovery that in Libya, persons like me, refugees, some people from different African countries were being used as a tool to extort money. And not only that, the existing government as of that time, because there was still the UN recognized government that was in place, they were not doing anything about it. I did survive that, and when I found myself with no other alternative, including the presence of UNHCR, I had attempted to cross the Mediterranean Sea, only to be captured and pulled back to Libya, followed by arbitrary detention, torture, enslavement, and you mentioned all those dehumanizing experiences that no one should be subjected to. As a result, I remember well how long I did spend several months in Al-Qararim, a detention facility in Misrata. It's under the DSIM, the Directorate for Combating quote-unquote illegal immigration. These places, UNHCR and different humanitarian agencies were present. Day and night, they were coming, they saw everything, they could see our wounds, they could bandage it together, they brought packets of biscuits and other non-food items, which was already a point of frustration to me because it was an intention to keep us adapting to a situation we never wanted to be in and a situation we should have never been put to. I could not give up on the idea that Europe for now is the only ultimate place I could go and find safety, because I couldn't go back to Chad, I couldn't go back to Sudan. Libya as a country did not give me also the option of considering to stay in it. So I made several attempts to reach Europe, 3, 4, 5. Each of those times I was pulled back to Libya, and then I turned my attention to the humanitarian agencies to try to question what was their role in our lives as refugees, as quote-unquote immigrants in the country. From here, I realized there was something critical was our attention as people in need. We were not being given the attention that we needed. We were not being included or involved in the decision-making processes. Even the food items and the protection measures they were taking to allegedly ensure that we are fine, we were never consulted. You just called over the phone, you have a protection interview, okay, we're giving you this, you can return after 3 months. So the services basically was dead. But because we had no other alternative, we had to depend on this only solution. So I lived with all these circumstances until 2021, the 1st of October, where there was a neighborhood called Gargarej. It's west of Tripoli. It was under attack. I think I did mention it in the previous episode that we had. It was under attack by violent hands, men and militias affiliated with the Ministry of Interior. The allegation was that they were coming to clean the neighborhood from gangs, from all that. But as a person who had lived in Gargarej, in that particular neighborhood for several years, and being a community mobilizer, we were all the persons of concern, quote unquote, to the office of UNHCR, which means we were asylum seekers, we were refugees with all our documents, living in that particular makeshift buildings. Not because we wanted to be there, but because Libya as a state did not give us any other alternative than to live in those slums. So when it went under attack, the militias, they came for us with armed weapons, with armored tanks, as if we were a bunch of terrorists. Because the act of violence that was unleashed that very day it can only be unleashed on terrorists or on criminal gangs, which we were not. We were not even armed. You don't take an armored vehicle and heavy weaponry to go and arrest refugees, abduct them, and keep them in a warehouse, which is what happened. So, at least according to the state, about 5,000 people were arrested forcibly and then detained in one of the warehouses called Al-Mabani and Tereksika and others. But as a person who was there in Gilgamesh, there were more than 10,000 people arrested on that day and disappeared into the human trafficking chain, because this is what we know. The state is committing and has been conducting human trafficking business across Libya. Those of us who survived, including myself, we went to the UNHCR headquarters, not because we trusted, but it was the only thing left. We went there, we said, here's the situation. We had expected you to sound an alarm to say there is a state of emergency, because if a population of 10,000 people have been destroyed, and these were primarily persons under your mandate, and you have not said a thing, what does that mean? We need protection right now. We do not want to stay here in Libya. What the UNHCR officials told us that evening, that they had a limited mandate to operate in Libya, and they did not expect what was happening, and therefore they can offer us nothing. In my circumstance, as a young man, I was already gotten used to that situation, because I was a former volunteer of UNHCR itself in Libya. Until I resigned, I could not take it anymore, because I knew the system was not truly designed to protect the vulnerable communities. It was designed to keep its reputation, to keep its power, and to keep the refugees at bay from arriving to Europe. So from here, it was really necessary and fundamental to come together and to start mobilizing. That is when I started to speak to colleagues who became co-founders of Refugees in Libya Today. We started to mobilize the women to find a bilingual community who could speak more than one language, because we were thousands of people from 11 nationalities, and we needed to have a common goal. Although our common problem was already there, which was the lack of protection, lack of recognition, lack of shelter in Libya, and to denounce the dehumanizing treatment which we were receiving. You mentioned from torture, from rape, from extortion, from different harassment, not to even mention the racism that exists within Libya as one of the Arab countries, which find itself in front line when it's coming face and face with people who does not have the same beliefs, or who does not embrace Islam as the true religion to which they belong. Here we mobilized ourselves and we formed our own committees, and we started to sit basically permanently in front of the UNHCR, demanding an audience, demanding a stage for dialogue, which did happen only when we had resisted, only when some of us had been shot at by the militias and killed, only when children had been knocked down by cars because we were in the streets of Tripoli in a side way. Vehicles were passing in a whole neighborhood which did not want us, because we were chaotic people who are vulnerable, without tents, without anything. We were just there in the open, and the neighborhood was not happy about it. But we had to find our way to be able to speak with them, and when we managed it, they started to support us. So this is basically not very short to explain, but this is what happened during that moment, and why we started to denounce the unfair treatment of UNHCR to this very day, which is going now to higher level, because they keep ignoring, they keep fleeing from recognizing us as proper interlocutors that could be brought to the table when state officials are there, when donor states are there, when the hosting communities are there.
Yeah, that was a good explanation of what happened, and so then you left Libya, you made it to Italy. I think you were rescued at sea by one of the rescue ships, right?
No, I made it autonomously. I was not rescued.
Wow, that is a unbelievable journey. I think you talked about it in our last interview. And then since you've been in Italy, has it been like 3 years now, has it?
3 years already, yes.
Yeah, you've become like quite a famous campaigner now, I think. You've started a new campaign called the Unfair Campaign. Can you tell us about that? And I think you kind of already have, actually, but tell us a bit more about the Unfair Campaign and what your goals are.
Yeah, with the Unfair Campaign, yes, I did just touch it briefly, because for us it was necessary to not only stop with our protest in Tripoli. When I left, and after being hunted down by the Libyan militias, and I had to risk my life on the Mediterranean to reach Italy, I had left thousands of people behind in Libya who were suffering from the same problem that I had endured. I had also left comrades behind who were arrested in front of the UNHCR headquarters because UNHCR had neglected us and called us that we were troublemakers and we were not even registered in their system. When this happened, this gave a green light to the Libyan militias and the Minister of Interior to come and clear our encampment. So during that violent eviction, at least according to them, more than 600 people were rounded up and taken to Nzara. These people were the people who had spent 100 days, horrible days, consecutively with me in the street. So there was no other alternative to not see them even in my sleep. They became a living nightmare because what they were experiencing and the fact that I knew exactly what was happening to them, I could not relax and sit back. I had to mobilize and take my own voice, first of all, to the UNHCR headquarters in Geneva, the headquarters that for more than 20 years my life had at some point in whole or in part depended on. So we decided to go to Geneva, and by going to Geneva, we were looking for what fits the conditions that we had suffered, what fits the neglection that we had suffered from UNHCR. Here we found it was unfair because we did not have any proper accountability mechanism that we could take against the UNHCR. And at the same time, we were not calling for them to be disbanded because in one way or another, they still managed to rescue a number of lives, even though it has become a containment system, as I will articulate later on. With the Unfair Campaign, we were demanding that the UNHCR recognize us, refugee-led movement, has proper interlocutors that can be able to sit and have a dialogue and be able to make proposals and recommendations on how to deal with our society as a whole. This was one of the fundamental goals, but also to accelerate their service delivery in Libya, which was lacking. Even people wanting to apply for asylum were not able to do so within a period of 6 months. People wanting to renew their document, it was not happening. The UNHCR headquarters was being heavily guarded by militias, which they called the diplomatic police. And there was nothing diplomatic about them. It was a bunch of thugs and criminals armed with a Kalashnikov that never understood the language of a pregnant woman that needs to access the UNHCR building in order to be taken to the hospital, or a child whose mother has been kidnapped and is being tortured somewhere across Libya and is homeless and needs shelter. Within all these things, there were several demands that we wanted them to first recognize that they had treated us unfairly for 3 months and 10 days in front of their office permanently without the recognition to sit and have a call with us, and the fact that they had failed to condemn the violence that the Libyan state officials were committing on refugees, or to say it plainly, persons of concern to the office of the UNHCR. This was basically one of the fundamental goals and demands of the campaign, and the idea was also to put pressure on the UNHCR in a way that it can lobby with the Libyan state to sign and ratify the 1951 Geneva Refugee Convention, which it had not signed, and to this very day it has not signed. And as a result, it's using it as an excuse to say, no, we are not part of that convention. We are free to do what we want with the refugees. We can rep them, we can contain them in a warehouse, we can sell them, we can put them to forced labor, and they can lay us breaks, they can do this, they can do our housework. All these things we had felt was an excuse to do what they are doing right now, and the UNHCR has not been vocal about it. And this is a clear example that UNHCR has been in Libya for more than 30 years. For 30 years, the children who have registered as asylum seekers and became refugees cannot access education in Libya because the Libyan government does not recognize the system that the UNHCR is operating, not even the identification cards or the asylum paper that is provided through the UN mechanism. So that's it.
Yeah, it sounds like a really, really bad situation in Libya. Like, if people are stuck there, the government doesn't recognize them as refugees, and then the UNHCR isn't denouncing. It's surprising that UNHCR hasn't been more vocal about this. Did you say they've met? Have you met with UNHCR?
Yes, when we went to Geneva in 2022, that was on December 10th, we did meet with the UNHCR officials who are responsible for the Middle East and North African region. And then also, just as yesterday, not just yesterday, but on the 12th and 13th of what month is it? September? Yeah, September. We were in Geneva. That was a few days ago. And we did meet with the UN officials again. We discussed what was happening. So from time to time, we try to go and knock on their door again because we are just fed up from the normal talks, the so-called dialogue, and nothing is being effective. That's why we take time to initiate meaningful campaign that may, in a way, hold UNHCR accountable, and at the same time highlight the plight and responsibility of a state, both in Libya and in Europe, towards refugees.
Mm. And you've recently published a book called The Book of Shame. Can you tell us about The Book of Shame?
The Book of Shame, I'm trying to find the right word for it because it's even shameful to talk about it. From the range of things that I have highlighted, how UNHCR had neglected us, we came to realize that we were not the only one in Libya. I have had vast experiences of relationship with UNHCR from the time I was born. In Central Africa, in Cameroon, in Chad, in Nigeria, in Niger, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Congo. You mention it, all the way to Libya. So when we realized that we were not the only one protesting, people have been protesting in Kakuma, people have been protesting in Jordan against the lack of protection from UNHCR or the lack of recognition or respect. Whatever you mention, that humane connection between the UNHCR system and the people who are recipient of their aid. So here, as a collective, we came together, refugees in Tunisia who had been inspired by refugees in Libya. They also were having the same experiences. Each of the time we were having a protest, UNHCR was always the first to try to dismantle it, to try to silence us instead of listening. As a result, they could cooperate with authorities, they could engage with the militias. It's the same that when people in 2022 were protesting in Zarzis for better treatment, for accommodation, the UNHCR framed them as troublemakers, and then they ended up being dumped in the desert by the Tunisian government. When they went to Tunis, to the capital in 2023 and 2022, and set up a permanent camp there to say we need international protection, they were abandoned and neglected by the UNHCR. This resulted into a number of them has vividly, I remember, on the 3rd of May 2024, several hundreds of people who were UNHCR asylum seekers and refugees in front of UNHCR headquarters in Tunis were rounded up by the Tunisian security forces and dumped in the desert. Some of them, as I speak, are in Niger, in the Agadez so-called humanitarian camp. So when we realized all these issues and the fact that they had not even recognized the unfair campaign and the demands that we had placed there, then we decided to pile up the innumerable testimonies that we have collected through our work as self-organized networks, because we operate several hotlines that is in response to the lack of the efficiency of UNHCR. So we piled all these up in coordination with refugees in Niger, refugees in Tunisia, and refugees in Libya. We came up to write this disgraceful book of shame, which contains a number of testimonies, but of course our manifesto, our demands, what we want. As I have already articulated, the demands that we want UNHCR to recognize us, to be seen as interlocutors, to have a meaningful dialogue, to have a window through which refugee-led organizations can communicate with the UNHCR and make proposals or be as consultants. They don't consult us at all. They do things and they say, okay, we have our consulting team. Who are these people? If a person like Vicente Costel has been heading UNHCR for 20 years and he's never been a refugee, he's never slept hungry against his will because he was forced to move to Austria, how can he understand truly what is happening to a mother and her 2 daughters who are dumped in the so-called humanitarian center in Agadez for 80 years? Because if not containment system, what is it? To have people in the middle of the desert for 80 years, they don't have access to education, they have limited access to food and water, let alone the harsh conditions of the desert. When these people demonstrate against what is happening to them, you call them troublemakers, you call them they don't have the right to resettlement. Resettlement is not a right. They cannot be entitled to that, which is not what they want. They're asking for the improvement of services. When this is not being met, what do the people do? The UNHCR, they call on the Nigerian authority, they cooperate with them, they revoke refugee status from people who are organizing these peaceful protests inside the camp. And these have also led to a number of human rights defenders being deported to a country they have never been to. For example, Sudanese have been deported to Nigeria. Others have now been deported to Chad. How does it happen? Why is UNHCR not being vocal about this? Well, we know that everything that happens there is with the knowledge of UNHCR. So this is what contains the Book of Shame, but a huge part of it also focuses on the experiences of refugees and asylum seekers in Libya who cannot access UNHCR at all. It stands like a huge mountain that you cannot climb.
Yeah, that was a good summary of the book, and people listening can go to refugeesinlibya.org. And you can find the whole book there. You can download it for free. And I think you're also selling a paper copy of the book as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work that has been put to this by self-organized people. We're not having jobs, but that's not something we want for a profit, but to support our campaigns. We are selling physical copies. The digital copy can be downloaded for free, but if people want to support our campaigns, there is a minimum donation that people can make and they can have the book delivered to them.
Yeah, I think I will buy it after our interview today. So you wrote the book, not just yourself, but it was with refugees in Libya, refugees in Tunisia, and refugees in Niger, right? It was you these 3 groups.
That's right.
And looks like quite a lot of people are involved. It's really good, and I saw your protest outside the UNHCR. I think it was last week or I don't know, this month, right?
Yes.
And that's when I wanted to get you back on. Are you okay for time, David? Have you got a bit more? Can I ask you a couple more questions?
Yeah, well, I've got 3 minutes.
I would like to know about your campaigning, because also you don't just campaign about the UNHCR's treatment. You're also campaigning against Italy's relations with Libyan government and Italy's memorandum of understanding. I know your phone was hacked, and that's crazy. I hope my phone wasn't hacked because you had my phone number. Who knows? So yeah, can you tell us about this campaigning in Italy that you've been involved in, and maybe talk about the phone hacking as well?
Well, as you said, I may be called a campaigner, but that's not a title that I would have wanted to be in my life. But circumstance, as I have described, has pushed me to this level thus far. And in the Book of Shame itself, we don't only talk about the UNHCR. Of course, when we are talking about UNHCR and we are highlighting the problems that a woman was raped and she was detained and what happens here is it's up to the person who is reading the book to understand why was the person raped, by who. Then there is the state responsibility. Why are detention camps in Libya? By who is it funded? So all these questions are contained in this book is for the world to see. Within it is the irresponsibility of IOM and so on and so forth. So this brings me to the fact that we are not only campaigning against UNHCR but also the state. For example, Italy since 2017 has signed a memorandum of understanding with Libya, a bunch of militias. This memorandum have made me suffer. I have experienced it firsthand, and people continue to be tortured, to be captured at gunpoint and returned back to Libya thanks to this memorandum. The Libyan militias are being trained, they are being equipped, and millions of euros, European taxpayers' money, are being channeled to these entities to do one thing, to deter refugees and asylum seekers from reaching the European territory. So what we did see here within this framework, when we understood who was behind this memorandum, we decided to denounce it. Even during our protest in Tripoli, we had written a manifesto, and in this manifesto, it was one of the demands that we had, that we want Italy to stop financing the Libyan militias and the so-called Libyan Coast Guard. This, when it has not been looked at with enough consideration, we came to Italy, we did demonstrations, we protested against the MOU in 2022, in October. Again, nothing. This is why this time we have initiated a huge mass mobilization to take place on the 18th of October, ahead of the renewal of the memorandum, which will happen on the 2nd of November. But this time I'm very glad to announce that we are not alone. We are being supported fully by more than 60 organizations. This stems from Sea Rescue to different civil society organizations across Europe, including Amnesty, including Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders, and all the big names that you can find there who stand on the principle of defending human rights.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
And to mention the hacking, of course, just to briefly say, the Italian government doesn't like to be named and shamed. They don't want to be held accountable for their complicity in the crimes against humanity, has already articulated in the UN Independent Fact-Finding Mission that was issued around March 2023. This report already highlighted that there is a strong reason to believe that European money has, aided and abated crimes against humanity, that in whole or in part has also affected asylum seekers and refugees in the country. So as a result, we did also take European politicians to the International Criminal Court, including the Libyan politicians or the criminals that we know, the mafia entity. So stemming from this reason, the Italian government started to, install mercenary spyware called Paragon Solution on my devices and the networks around me to surveil, while at the same time framing me as a threat to the Italian national security in a way that I do not understand. So this is how I have been subjected to a spyware attack since, according to the Italian government, since July 2023 to this very moment. I am not safe. I am not able to sleep safely and soundly in Italy as I used to be in the early days that I arrived in Italy.
And how did you find out about the hacking?
Well, thanks to Apple, I had received a notification from them on my iCloud that my phone was subjected to mercenary spyware attack, and that I had to take a strong measure. When I read this email, I tried to verify. I contacted Apple, and it was a true email threat notification. And as a result, I took different measures with the tech teams to check what was happening. That's when we realized that I was being infected with Paragon Solution.
Yeah, that's terrible. I don't know. I've not heard of that company before. But yeah, that's really terrible.
It's worse than Pegasus.
Yeah, Pegasus, I think, was an Israeli firm. I think, I'm not sure.
Also, the Paragon Solution is an Israeli firm.
Okay. Yeah, that's really terrible. And hopefully you're not being spied on now. But yeah, who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. And so, well, David, that was really, really good to talk to you. I hope if I can come next month, then it would be great to talk to you in person.
Yeah, you are coming. I think we need you there to document also what you see so you can amplify the voices, because we will have a stage of survivors which will bring people who have experienced Libya firsthand and the horrors of the MOU. They will have a bigger stage to speak. They will come from all over Europe, including from the UK, from London. We have people from Manchester who are already on their way to Italy to come and denounce what the Italian government is doing.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. I've got to check that I can make it. I think I can. I'm just not sure yet, but I will let you know. Hopefully.
Don't forget to place the order for the book. So I will not send you. So I will give it to you by hand in Italy when you come.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Well, David, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Okay, that was episode 79 of the Civil Fleet podcast. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thanks again to David and to everyone at Refugees in Libya and everyone who works on A Book of Shame for doing the amazing work that you do. Thanks to David for coming on. He's a very busy man, so I'm very, very happy that he managed to get some time for the Civil Fleet podcast. Also, thanks to you for listening and supporting our work and for listening to these amazing people that we get on this podcast. So at the end of the podcast, I'd like to remind you to go check out the Civil Fleet blog. Go to civilfleet.com and you can find investigative stories, news reports and interviews on there, including an old interview we did with David when he was in Libya. And if you like what the Civil Fleet is doing and you would like to help us to continue to platform these amazing people, then you can either share us around, tell your friends about it, give us a rating on podcast apps and things like that. Or you can give us some money and help us to keep the lights on, as it were. To do that, go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet and you can make a small donation there. You can make a one-off donation or a recurring monthly donation if you like. Yeah, so that's ko-fi.com/civilfleet. We've got at least 2 more episodes in the can at the moment, so be ready for a flurry of the Civil Fleet podcasts. And until next time, see you later. Cheers. Bye-bye.